You've probably seen impressive videos like these. Airplanes and helicopters flying extremely low, just 3 meters above the ground in Ukraine, almost colliding with cars, trees, power poles, and other obstacles. But why are they flying so low? Well, it's because if you fly just a little higher, you will certainly be shot down by a Russian missile. This technique is well known and has been used in the past in several conflicts, such as the Gulf War, for example. But why does flying low mean not being hit by a missile? To understand why flying low basically means staying alive, it's important to understand how radar works. A radar constantly emits electromagnetic waves that travel through the air. If there is any object in the path of these waves, like an airplane, they will come into contact with its surface and be reflected back to the radar. Based on this return, the radar knows there is an aircraft there. However, if the aircraft is flying very low, it becomes hidden by trees, buildings, and other infrastructure. And that's how the plane manages to camouflage itself and fly relatively safely. But obviously, flying that low greatly increases the risk of colliding with a building, house, or power line, which also increases the chance, in case of a crash, of the plane falling into a populated area. This kind of flight also demands a tremendous physical and especially psychological effort from the pilot, who must be highly alert to possible obstacles, especially power lines, which are often only visible after hitting them. The Soviet physicist Pyotr Ufimtsev managed to prove that it's possible to make an aircraft practically invisible to radar by changing the configuration of angles and the shape of the leading and trailing edges of the aircraft, which led to the development of the highly classified Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk. The F-117 was the first truly radar-invisible aircraft, which led to the creation of several others, like the B-2 Spirit and the F-22 Raptor. However, these are very expensive aircraft used for very specific missions. But flying low doesn't exactly mean you won't be hit. Heat-seeking missiles, for instance, launched from enemy planes, drones, or helicopters, are a serious threat. There's also the risk of the plane flying right over an anti-aircraft battery and getting shot down. So, how do you intercept a Russian missile mid-flight, which is the real threat? On October 12, 2022, the Ukrainian intelligence service released a chart showing the estimated remaining stockpile of Russian high-precision missiles. Let's set aside the last two on the chart, which are cruise missiles. The first missile shown, and also the one with supposedly the lowest remaining stock in the Russian arsenal, known as the Iskander missile, is considered the most feared, most accurate, and one of the most destructive and hardest to intercept. The Iskander is a short-range ground-launched missile that flies at Mach 6, or about 7,350 kilometers per hour. It has a range of 500 kilometers, flying about 50 meters above ground. When launched from Russian territory, it can hit a doorway in Ukraine with good accuracy. And because it flies extremely fast, it is extremely hard to intercept and shoot down mid-air with any of Ukraine's current defense systems. Its destructive power, depending on its explosive payload, is capable of causing serious damage and even collapsing a building just from the impact. That's why it's one of the most expensive and feared missiles. The other two are cruise missiles, especially the Kalibr, Russia's equivalent of the American Tomahawk. These are missiles launched from the sea by defense vessels that can travel 2,500 kilometers, carrying 500 kilograms of conventional explosives or a thermonuclear warhead. Cruise missiles are designed for long-range missions and fly more slowly, making them easier to intercept. Ukraine's current defense system is mainly composed of S-300 surface-to-air missile launch systems built by the former Soviet Union, with ranges up to 400 kilometers. These systems find their targets using active radar and detonate via proximity. Each missile costs more than $1.2 million. In other words, anything that flies over Ukrainian skies and poses a potential threat is taken down by one of these missiles. But Russia added another item to the equation: kamikaze drones. Known by their technical name Shahed 136, these Iranian-made drones were acquired by Russia in the hundreds. The Shahed 136 is a low-cost drone costing between $10,000 and $20,000, guided by GLONASS, Russia's version of GPS, weighing 220 kilograms, with a range of more than 2,500 kilometers, flying at low altitude at a speed of 185 kilometers per hour, and carrying a 50-kilogram explosive payload. With just 3.5 meters in length, it does considerable damage when it hits its target. For example, on October 10th, an attack by a group of several Shahed 136 drones and a few missiles destroyed about 40% of Ukraine's electrical infrastructure. An attack using 83 missiles and 17 drones. One of the key features of the Shahed 136 is how it's launched from a specially modified container on the back of a truck. Additionally, the Shahed is powered by a moped engine. This engine, the Mado 550, with just a few small modifications by the Chinese, is a two-stroke engine that's quite efficient, which is why the Shahed 136 can fly for about 2,500 kilometers. The problem for the Ukrainians is that these $10,000 drones, considered extremely cheap for military equipment, are being shot down with missiles that cost more than $1.2 million each. Even using the Javelin, designed to destroy armored vehicles, each missile still costs $78,000. And one of the main characteristics of these drones is that several of them are launched all at once, either at the same target or multiple different ones, which makes them extremely costly and difficult to shoot down using Ukraine's current defense system, even with international help and new supplies. So how do you take these drones down effectively and cheaply? The answer is bullets. Specifically, bullets fired from the CRAM, or counter-rocket artillery and mortar, which is an automatic firing system used to detect and destroy, while still in the air, rockets, airplanes, helicopters, drones, and anything else approaching before hitting ground targets. The system uses 20mm bullets and can fire 4,500 rounds per minute. All very impressive, except for one detail. The CRAM has a range of just 1.5 kilometers, which means it can only hit the drone or missile if it's within that radius. Besides having a hit rate of 60%, accuracy drops even more the higher the target is, mainly because of wind interference affecting the bullet trajectory. Moreover, to improve its effectiveness, multiple systems would need to be spread out over potential high-value targets in Ukraine, like government buildings, nuclear power plants, substations, weapons depots, and so on. And each unit costs between $10 and $15 million. Basically, for the price of one, you could buy 1,500 Shahed drones. In other words, currently there's no proper, cheap, and effective way to shoot down a Shahed 136. Ukrainians are relying on $1.2 million missiles to take them down, along with common firearms. And when it comes to the missiles, which are the real threat, they also rely on S-300s and a few others to intercept them. However, since the start of the invasion, many journalists have pointed out that Russia has experienced high and significant missile failure rates. The failures have been classified as launch failures, engine ignition failures, failure to hit the target, and even failure to detonate. This may be due to Russia launching attacks at such a fast pace that they're using missiles that haven't been properly inspected. It could also be due to Russia using very old missiles, which has already been confirmed, or due to Russia struggling to find spare parts for their missiles because of imposed sanctions. But one thing is certain, the missiles have been failing significantly. However, far from the headlines, there exists an American missile so fast, so precise, and so devastating that it was never designed to be used, only to be known. It can be launched without warning from underwater and erase entire cities in minutes. And yet, paradoxically, it may be the very reason we've gone decades without a full-scale global conflict. Click this video to know more about the weapon responsible for world peace.